Sometimes, the darkest stories don't begin in the shadows. They begin in the quiet streets of an ordinary neighborhood where life looks normal from the outside, until one day, everything collapses into chaos. This is not just another murder case. This is the story of a father, his two children, and a hidden bond that would twist into something so sinister that it shook an entire city. Welcome to Jabalpur, where the chilling tale of the Kavya Mukul case first began. In the heart of Jabalpur, nestled inside Railway Millennium Colony, most families lived simple, routine-driven lives. The colony mostly housed employees of the Indian Railways and their families. Among them was Rajkumar Vishwakarma, a quiet and disciplined man working as an office superintendent. Rajkumar was raising his two children, 16-year-old Kavya and 8-year-old Tanishq, alone. His wife, Arti, had tragically passed away less than a year earlier, leaving a hole in their lives that time had not yet managed to fill. That loss had deeply scarred the family. Arti's death had been sudden. She collapsed from a heart attack during a family trip to Katra in May 2023. Rajkumar returned home a broken man, left to pick up the pieces for the sake of his children. To protect them from drowning in grief, he temporarily sent Kavya and Tanishq to their grandparents in their ancestral village, Paparia. But by February 2024, Rajkumar brought them back to Jabalpur for their studies. Kavya had her crucial 10th grade board exams coming up, while Tanishq was still in the 4th grade. Slowly, it seemed life was settling back into a rhythm, though grief lingered like a silent shadow in their home. But fate had other plans. On the afternoon of March 15, 2024, one of Rajkumar's relatives visited the family's quarters. To his surprise, the house was locked from the outside. He knocked repeatedly, but no one answered. Concerned, he asked the neighbors if they had seen the family. Strangely, no one had. Since morning, Rajkumar and his children had not been spotted. The neighborly silence gave way to worry. Where could they have gone without telling anyone? Just then, hundreds of miles away, Rajkumar's niece Muskan received a chilling voice message on her phone. The sender was none other than Kavya. Her words were trembling, almost breathless, but the message was shockingly direct. "Muskan, come to Jabalpur quickly. Papa and Tanishq have been killed by Mukul." That was it. Nothing more. No explanation. No details. Only those haunting words. Muskan froze, unable to believe her ears. She hadn't even checked the message when it first arrived. But now, realizing its weight, she ran to her parents in a state of panic. Within minutes, the family alerted relatives in Jabalpur and begged them to rush to Rajkumar's house immediately. The relative who had been waiting outside the locked home wasted no time. Police were called. Within an hour, officers from Civil Lines Police Station and the Railway Police arrived on the scene. Neighbors gathered nervously as the lock was broken open in front of everyone. The door creaked as it opened, but what lay inside was nothing short of a nightmare. The house was eerily quiet, the air heavy with a strange smell. And then, the first body was found. Lying on the kitchen floor, wrapped loosely in plastic sheets, was Rajkumar Vishwakarma. His head had been brutally smashed with a heavy object. Blood had soaked through the polythene and dried on the floor. His lifeless body told the story of a merciless killing. But if Rajkumar was here, then where were his children? The police searched frantically, every bedroom, the bathroom, the storeroom, even under the beds. But Kavya and Tanishq were nowhere to be seen. That made the discovery even more horrifying. If Kavya's message was real, had both children also been murdered? As officers scoured the house, one constable noticed something odd. On the refrigerator door, faint smears of blood could be seen. On the handle and along its edges, a chill ran down his spine. Slowly, he pulled open the door. Inside, wrapped in a blanket and stuffed into the cramped compartment, was the tiny body of Tanishq. His young face was pale, frozen in silence. The boy had suffered head injuries identical to his father's. The gruesome sight sent shivers through even the most hardened policeman. A father and son were dead. Only Kavya remained unaccounted for. But where was she? And why had she sent that cryptic message about Mukul? At first glance, it appeared that the killer had tried to cover his tracks. Bloodstains in the bathroom sink suggested someone had washed up after the murders. Bandages and cloth had been wrapped around the victim's wounds, possibly to stop blood from spreading across the house. There were signs of meals in the kitchen, uncleaned plates, half-eaten food, implying the killer had lingered in the house after the crime. Even incense sticks had been lit, perhaps to mask the smell of blood. The whole scene was chillingly methodical, yet strangely careless in other ways. Whoever had done this had both brutality and calculation on their side. The biggest mystery now was Kavya. Was she another victim waiting to be found, or had she been taken away by Mukul, the boy she mentioned in her message? As police widened their search, the name Mukul began echoing across the colony. Neighbors revealed he was a young man living in flat 36A, right next door. His family included his parents, a brother, and a sister. But who was he really, and what did he have to do with this blood-soaked house of horrors? The first breakthrough came when police reviewed CCTV footage from the colony. Around 12:30 p.m. on March 15th, the same day of the murders, Mukul was spotted, leaving on his scooter. He appeared calm, carrying something in his hands. Minutes later, another camera caught Kavya leaving as well, walking alone. She was carrying a mobile phone, but here was the twist. Her personal phone was found inside the house, which meant the phone she was holding belonged to someone else, most likely her late mother. And yet, despite these disturbing clues, the footage showed no fear on her face, no signs of struggle. She looked like she knew exactly where she was going. That detail was unsettling. If Mukul had killed her father and brother, why was Kavya seen following him willingly? Was she kidnapped, threatened, or, an even darker thought, was she complicit in this entire plan? The more police dug, the more unsettling the picture became. And when they discovered that just a few months earlier Mukul had been arrested for abducting Kavya, the case turned from tragic to horrifyingly complex. But what happened after the CCTV footage? Where did Mukul and Kavya go once they left the colony? And why did Kavya accuse Mukul in a message, yet appear to walk beside him freely later? The answers, as the investigation unraveled, would shake Jabalpur to its core. When the police uncovered the first CCTV trail of Kavya and Mukul walking away from their colony, it became clear that this was no ordinary murder case. A father and son were brutally killed, and the teenage daughter who should have been a victim was instead seen escaping with the prime suspect. The contradictions were dizzying. Was Kavya running for her life, or was she running away from the truth she herself was hiding? Investigators quickly tracked their route. Around 12:40 p.m. that day, Mukul's scooter was spotted heading toward Madan Mahal railway station. Minutes later, Kavya appeared there too, this time riding pillion on the scooter. Security footage showed the pair entering the station together, as if nothing had happened back at the house where two dead bodies lay waiting to be discovered. For a moment, police thought they had tried to catch a train and escape far away. But then came the bizarre twist. They exited the station barely 2 minutes after entering. They hadn't boarded any train. They had deliberately created a diversion. From the station, the duo was next caught on cameras boarding a yellow bus labeled Krishnakunj. The bus conductor later confirmed that they purchased tickets only for a short distance. Yet halfway through, they suddenly demanded the bus stop, claiming they needed medicine. They got off at a random spot, only to board another bus minutes later, this time toward Katni. To the trained eyes of investigators, this wasn't the path of frightened runaways. It was the path of people carefully trying to erase their tracks. Why would a teenage girl be so calm, so deliberate, unless she knew exactly what she was doing? The suspicion deepened when police dug into Mukul's history. This wasn't the first time he had run away with Kavya. Just 6 months earlier, in September 2023, he had abducted her. Back then, she was still a minor, only 16. He had taken her to a resort near Bedagat, where, according to her father's complaint, he forced himself upon her. The police had rescued her after 2 days, and Mukul had been arrested under the stringent PO-CSO Act. His stint in jail was short, barely 2 weeks, before the High Court granted him bail. But those days behind bars had changed him. Neighbors said he returned more withdrawn, more hostile, as though prison had hardened him instead of teaching him a lesson. Kavya's father, Rajkumar, had been furious about the incident. He wanted his daughter far away from Mukul's influence, so he sent her to their ancestral village for months. But even distance couldn't sever their connection. With smartphones and social media apps, Kavya and Mukul stayed in constant touch. And that was when Mukul began planting darker thoughts into Kavya's young mind. He convinced her that her father was the greatest obstacle in their love. He whispered that freedom could only be earned if the obstacle was removed forever. Slowly, disturbingly, Kavya began to agree. The pieces started aligning for investigators. The message Kavya sent her cousin Muskan, accusing Mukul of killing her father and brother, might have been a cover-up, a red herring to buy them time. Why would a girl who had a working phone in her hand not call the police? Why wouldn't she run to her neighbors for help? Instead, she walked hand in hand with the very boy she accused. The grim possibility emerged that this was not a case of kidnapping at all. It was a conspiracy between two lovers, bound not by innocence, but by a shared crime. Meanwhile, the forensic evidence inside the Vishwakarma home painted a chilling picture. The back door lock had scorch marks, suggesting someone had used a gas cutter to force entry. Surveillance footage later showed Mukul near the house at 3 a.m. on the morning of March 15th, carrying a bag and gloves. Investigators believed he had entered the home then, with Kavya's cooperation. By 7:30 a.m., neighbors heard Kavya scream, "Papa," a scream that now seemed staged, a performance to mask what was truly happening inside. Within minutes, Rajkumar and little Tanishq were dead, struck by repeated blows from a sharp weapon. Afterward, the killers ate, cleaned, and even lit incense to disguise the stench. Hours later, they walked out casually, leaving horror sealed inside. But how could a girl so young turn against her own blood? Police interviews revealed a disturbing pattern. Kavya had become increasingly rebellious after her mother's death. She often argued with her father, resented his rules, and saw Mukul as her escape. Mukul, in turn, fed her discontent, promising her love, freedom, and adventure. In truth, he had little to offer. He had barely passed high school, had no stable career, and spent most of his time in gyms, obsessed with bodybuilding and posting selfies online. Yet in Kavya's vulnerable eyes, he became her savior. It was the perfect storm: grief, teenage rebellion, and manipulation. As days turned into weeks, the manhunt for the pair stretched across India. The police chased them through bus stations, train platforms, even airports. At one point, they were traced to Pune, where Kavya used her Paytm wallet to pay at a restaurant. By the time police arrived, the two had vanished again. At another point, they withdrew nearly 1 lakh rupees using Rajkumar's ATM card. It was clear they were surviving on stolen money, hopping between hotels, temples, and even railway stations, always a step ahead of the law. Sometimes they begged for food, other times they blended into the crowd like ordinary travelers. But the chase only raised more questions. If Mukul was truly the mastermind, why did Kavya never try to escape, even when she had countless opportunities? And if Kavya was equally guilty, what had pushed her over the edge? Did she truly believe Mukul's twisted promises? Or was there something darker binding them together? Fear, blackmail, or even obsession? Every answer the police uncovered seemed to lead to another riddle. 2 months later, the chase finally ended, not with a dramatic arrest, but with a chance encounter. In May 2024, a woman police constable in Haridwar spotted a teenage girl and a young man sleeping on a hospital bench. Something about them felt familiar. She walked closer, studied their faces, and recognized them instantly. The posters of Wanted, Mukul, and Kavya had been circulating nationwide. The constable quickly called for backup. Within minutes, Kavya was in custody. Mukul, however, managed to slip away in the confusion. But that was not the final twist, because when Kavya was brought back to Jabalpur, her statements turned the case upside down. She did not act like a kidnapped girl finally rescued. She acted like someone whose carefully constructed world had collapsed. Her cold, emotionless confession left even hardened officers stunned. She admitted that she had been part of the plan from the very beginning. She admitted that she had not only allowed Mukul into the house, but had also wanted her father and brother out of the way. The truth was far darker than anyone had imagined. Yet even as the case seemed to reach clarity, new mysteries emerged. Why had Mukul chosen that specific morning to strike? Why had Kavya's message deliberately framed him while she still followed him? And most haunting of all, was it really love that drove a girl to destroy her family? Or was it something else entirely? The answers to those questions would only be revealed in the final stage of the investigation. And when they came to light, they would shock the entire nation. Every crime story leaves behind a trail of horror, but some cases reveal truths so twisted, so unimaginable, that they force us to question the very idea of love, family, and trust. When Kavya was finally brought back to Jabalpur, the investigation entered its most shocking stage. What had begun as a case of murder and abduction now turned into a terrifying tale of betrayal. A daughter who turned against her own father and brother, not under compulsion but by choice. Police interrogations with Kavya revealed details that chilled even the most seasoned officers. In her soft, calm voice, she admitted that Mukul had not forced her into anything. Instead, she had willingly stood beside him, step by step, as they planned the murders. She confessed that they had spent days discussing how to execute the crime, where to hide the bodies, and even how to mislead the police afterward. To her, Mukul was not just a lover. He was her partner in crime, someone she believed would free her from the chains of her father's control. But what kind of freedom comes at the price of blood? Investigators pieced together the timeline. On the night of March 14th, Mukul quietly approached the Vishwakarma home, carrying a gas cutter, gloves, and weapons hidden in a bag. The back door was left unsecured for him. He slipped inside while the world outside slept. He and Kavya spent the night together, waiting for morning. At dawn, Rajkumar rose as usual, ready to prepare breakfast for his children. He could not have known that his daughter's room, just a few steps away, hid both the boy he despised and the weapons of his own death. At 7:30 a.m., as he walked toward the kitchen, Mukul attacked from behind with a heavy axe. The blow was fatal. Rajkumar collapsed, his life ending in seconds. But the horror did not stop there. Little Tanishq, just 8 years old, woke up at the sound. He entered the kitchen and saw his father's bloodied body on the floor. His innocent cries filled the house, but before he could run or call for help, Mukul struck him too. The second blow silenced the boy forever. In those moments, a father and a son were gone, wiped out inside their own home, and standing there instead of screaming or stopping the violence was Kavya, not frozen in fear, not rushing to save her brother, but silently allowing the blood of her own family to flow. Afterward, the killers set about erasing the traces of their crime. They cleaned the blood, bandaged the wounds, wrapped the bodies, and stuffed Tanishq into the refrigerator. They lit incense sticks to cover the smell. Hours later, they casually ate breakfast in the same house where death lingered in every corner. By noon, they walked out, leaving behind nothing but silence, as though nothing had ever happened. It was a scene so surreal that even hardened investigators found it hard to process. The deeper police dug, the darker the revelations became. Mukul, barely in his 20s, was obsessed with crime thriller films. He idolized the villains who outsmarted the system, who lived by their own twisted rules. Prison had only deepened this obsession. He told Kavya that they could build a life together if only her father was gone. To him, Rajkumar was not just an obstacle, it was a challenge, a final boss he needed to defeat to win. He even kept a tattoo of 5 skulls on his chest, each representing someone he had marked as a target. Rajkumar was one, Tanishq, according to his twisted logic, was another, and disturbingly, Kavya herself was marked as well. Yet she never saw the danger. She believed his words, blind to the fact that she was merely a pawn in his dark fantasies. What made the case even harder to swallow was the nature of Kavya's role. At 16, she was still legally a minor, but her involvement was far from passive. She had not only known of the plan but had actively helped in its execution. She provided access to the house. She shielded Mukul from suspicion. She carried her mother's phone to stay untraceable, and she even recorded the false voice note that framed Mukul, planting confusion in the family's minds. It was not the act of a girl in danger. It was the act of a girl complicit in the destruction of her own family. The law now faced a painful dilemma. Should Kavya be treated as a victim, manipulated by an older man, or should she be tried as an active conspirator despite her age? Prosecutors pushed for the latter, arguing that her role was too significant to ignore. She was sent to a juvenile detention home, but the debate raged across the nation. Could love truly make a daughter betray her blood, or was this something far more sinister? An example of how obsession can corrupt the young mind beyond repair. Meanwhile, Mukul, after evading police for weeks, finally surrendered in Jabalpur. But his surrender was not an act of guilt. It was an act of fear. He worried that Kavya, under interrogation, would betray him, shifting the entire blame onto his shoulders. His arrogance cracked only when he realized that loyalty meant nothing once survival was at stake. His confession added little new information. The evidence was already overwhelming. But his cold, emotionless words painted a portrait of a boy who had long abandoned empathy, driven instead by fantasies of control and power. The final crime scene reconstruction confirmed the chilling details. Both Mukul and Kavya walked the investigators through every step of their actions that day. They showed where Mukul had entered, where the blows were struck, where the bodies were hidden, and how they had cleaned up afterward. They even admitted that their original plan had been far worse. They had intended to dismember the bodies and dispose of them piece by piece, just like in the movies Mukul admired. But in the end, they lost their nerve. Even in their cruelty, fear had drawn a line they could not cross. In Paparia, the ancestral home of the Vishwakarmas, grief turned into disbelief. Rajkumar's elder brother, who had performed the cremations of both Rajkumar and little Tanishq, now demanded the harshest punishment for Kavya. For him, there was no question of her being a victim. To him, she was the knife that stabbed her father in the back. The entire village mourned not just the dead, but the betrayal that had led to their deaths. As the case drew to a close, the nation was left divided. Was this simply a story of teenage rebellion gone horribly wrong, or was it proof of how dangerous manipulation can be when it meets youthful vulnerability? For every parent who heard the story, a chilling thought lingered. Could such darkness grow unnoticed under their own roof? Could the warmth of family truly be destroyed by the cold whispers of obsession? The truth of the Kavya Mukul case was laid bare. A father and son murdered in their own home, a daughter who chose her lover over her blood, and a boy who mistook fantasy for reality. Justice would run its course in the courts, but no matter the verdict, the questions this case left behind were far bigger than the answers. And so we leave you with this haunting thought. Was Kavya truly in love, blinded beyond reason, or had she always carried a seed of rebellion that found its perfect storm in Mukul's manipulations? In the end, who is more dangerous, the manipulator or the one who chooses to be manipulated?